15 Black R&B legends who couldn't stop cheating. They sang about everlasting love, loyalty and heartbreak, but behind the music, some of R&B's greatest legends were living very different stories. These 15 black music icons created timeless songs that generations still cherish, yet documented affairs, secret relationships and broken marriages revealed complicated lives away from the spotlight. From Motown superstars to soul pioneers, fame brought admiration, opportunity, and temptation that sometimes carried painful consequences. But how did these hidden relationships finally come to light, and which betrayal changed everything? Stay with us as Golden Black Legends uncovers the stories behind the love songs. Before we begin, subscribe, hit the like button, and comment below which R&B legend's private life surprised you the most. Smokey Robinson. For decades, Smokey Robinson seemed to embody the romantic elegance of Motown. His smooth voice gave the world songs about devotion, heartbreak, and longing, while his marriage to Claudette Rogers Robinson, a fellow member of the Miracles, appeared to connect his private life directly to those love songs. They married in 1959 before Motown became a cultural empire. Yet behind that enduring public image, Robinson later acknowledged that fidelity was one of the most complicated parts of his personal life. One relationship became especially famous because it involved another Motown legend, Diana Ross. In a 2023 interview, Robinson said that he and Ross had an affair that lasted roughly a year while he was married to Claudette. According to Robinson, Ross eventually ended the relationship because she knew Claudette and felt uncomfortable continuing it. Robinson also emphasized that this happened when they were adults, correcting persistent rumors suggesting they had dated as teenagers. The strain on his marriage went deeper. Robinson has acknowledged being unfaithful during his years on the road, and another relationship ultimately produced a son, Trey, born in 1984, while Robinson was still married. In his autobiography, he described that revelation as a decisive moment in the collapse of his marriage. Smokey and Claudette separated, and their divorce was finalized in 1986, ending a marriage that had lasted more than a quarter century. Yet Robinson has never reduced that chapter to a simple story of conquest. In later reflections, he has spoken about love, temptation, responsibility, and the damage complicated relationships can create. That distinction matters when telling his story accurately. The man who wrote some of Motown's most beautiful declarations of love discovered that writing about devotion was easier than consistently living by it. His extraordinary catalog remains untouched, but behind those timeless melodies was a personal life far messier than the romance heard on the records. James Brown. James Brown commanded a stage like few performers in history. Known as the Godfather of Soul, he built an astonishing career through relentless discipline, explosive performances, and recordings that helped shape funk, soul, and eventually hip-hop. Away from the spotlight, however, Brown's romantic history was considerably more chaotic. He married multiple times, fathered numerous children, and acknowledged a lifestyle in which relationships outside marriage were part of his world. Brown's first documented marriage was to Velma Warren in 1953. After that relationship ended, he married Deidre "Dee Dee" Jenkins in 1970. Their marriage lasted through much of Brown's extraordinary rise during the 1970s. But his life on the road brought temptations that did not remain outside the household. Brown later discussed infidelity in his own writings, while biographies and accounts from people around him described relationships with other women during his marriages. One particularly significant relationship involved Adrienne Rodriguez, whom Brown married in 1984 after his marriage to Jenkins had ended. Their union became turbulent and repeatedly attracted public attention. Rodriguez died in 1996. Brown later held a wedding ceremony with Tommy Ray Heine in 2001, although the legal validity of that marriage became the subject of extensive litigation after his death. Brown's family history was equally complicated. He publicly acknowledged several children, while additional paternity claims emerged both during and after his lifetime. Because the exact number of his biological children has been disputed, sensational claims assigning him a definitive total should be avoided unless tied to documented evidence. What can be established is already dramatic enough. Brown created music built around precision and absolute control, yet his private relationships often reflected the opposite. When James Brown died on December 25, 2006 at age 73, he left behind one of American music's greatest legacies and a personal history filled with marriages, infidelity, family disputes, and contradictions that made the man behind the music far more complicated than his stage persona. Lionel Richie. Lionel Richie built his career singing about devotion, longing, and unforgettable romance, but his own love life became far more complicated than the ballads that made him famous. Richie married his college sweetheart, Brenda Harvey, in 1975, years before his transformation from Commodore's frontman into one of the biggest solo stars of the 1980s. Together, they later adopted Nicole Richie, and for years their marriage existed alongside Lionel's rapidly expanding international fame. By the mid-1980s, however, the relationship was unraveling. Richie became involved with Diane Alexander, a dancer who appeared in his 1986 music video for Dancing on the Ceiling. Their relationship became public while Richie was still legally married to Brenda. In 1988, the situation exploded into headlines after Brenda confronted Richie and Alexander at Alexander's Beverly Hills residence. Brenda was arrested following the confrontation. The criminal case was later resolved. Lionel and Brenda ultimately divorced in 1993, ending approximately 18 years of marriage. Richie married Alexander in 1995. They had 2 children, Miles and Sophia Richie, but that marriage also ended in divorce in 2004. The documented timeline is dramatic enough without inventing additional affairs or labeling Richie with a medicalized addiction to women. Looking back, Richie has acknowledged that his enormous success came with personal sacrifices. During his peak years, touring, recording, and celebrity placed extraordinary pressure on family life. His first marriage survived his rise from college musician to global superstar, but it could not survive everything that came with it. That contradiction makes his story compelling. Lionel Richie created songs such as Endless Love and Hello Records that became soundtracks to other people's romances. Yet behind those polished melodies was a marriage fractured by a relationship that became painfully public, a reminder that the man singing about perfect love was living through something considerably messier. Bobby Womack. Bobby Womack's romantic history contains one of soul music's most controversial family entanglements. His story was already complicated before infidelity entered it. After his mentor Sam Cooke was killed in December 1964, Womack developed a relationship with Cooke's widow, Barbara Campbell Cooke. In March 1965, only months after Sam's death, 21-year-old Womack married Barbara, who was significantly older than him. The marriage generated enormous backlash. Many people within Cooke's circle considered the timing deeply disrespectful, and Womack later recalled the hostility he faced. Yet an even more damaging chapter emerged inside the marriage. Womack became involved with Linda Cooke, Barbara's daughter, and Sam Cooke's biological daughter. Linda was a young adult by the time the affair occurred, but the family connection made the betrayal especially explosive. Womack later discussed the incident himself. Barbara discovered the relationship and their marriage collapsed. They divorced in 1970. The episode followed Womack for decades because it combined infidelity with a uniquely painful family situation. He had betrayed his wife with her own daughter. His personal life remained turbulent afterward, but Womack's musical career survived. He became an important soul artist through recordings including That's the Way I Feel About Charwoman's, Gotta Have It, and Across 110th Street. Behind those songs was a man who later spoke candidly about many of his mistakes rather than pretending his private history had been spotless. That honesty matters when separating documented history from sensational storytelling. There is no need to invent dozens of unnamed mistresses to make Womack fit this subject. One confirmed affair already demonstrates the extraordinary damage infidelity caused in his life. Bobby Womack died in 2014 at age 70. His music remains deeply admired, but his relationship with Linda Cook became an uncomfortable part of his legacy, proof that some betrayals can alter an entire family, not merely end a marriage. Ray Charles. Ray Charles transformed American music while living a private life almost as complicated as his career was revolutionary. Blind since childhood, Charles fused gospel, blues, jazz, country and R&B into a sound that helped redefine popular music. But while audiences heard vulnerability in songs such as Georgia on My Mind, his second wife Della, Beatrice Howard Robinson, endured a marriage repeatedly challenged by his relationships with other women. Charles married Della in 1955 and they had 3 sons together. Their marriage lasted more than 2 decades, yet Charles later acknowledged that monogamy was never one of his strengths. Touring placed him around admirers constantly, and his autobiography openly described numerous sexual relationships. Unlike vague rumors surrounding many celebrities, much of the evidence about Charles' behavior came from the musician himself. His complicated family structure makes the scale particularly visible. Charles fathered 12 children with 10 women. Not every relationship automatically proves adultery because his children were born across different periods of his life, but several were conceived while he was married. Singer Margie Hendricks, a member of the Raelettes, had a son with Charles during his marriage to Della, while their professional and personal relationship became deeply intertwined. Della and Ray divorced in 1977 after 22 years of marriage. Charles never married again, although he maintained relationships later in life. Importantly, his blindness should never be used as a psychological explanation for his sexual behavior. Claims that promiscuity somehow compensated for his inability to see are speculation rather than established fact. Charles died in 2004 at age 73, leaving an immense musical and family legacy. His story carries an unmistakable contradiction. He could communicate tenderness through a song with breathtaking sincerity while repeatedly failing to practice exclusivity at home. Ray Charles never needed mythology to make his life fascinating. His own admissions reveal how genius, temptation, love and responsibility existed uneasily inside the same man. David Ruffin. David Ruffin possessed one of Motown's most powerful voices, but behind performances like My Girl and Ain't Too Proud to Beg was a personal life filled with overlapping relationships. Before fame fully arrived with the Temptations, Ruffin married Sandra Barnes in 1961. They had children together, yet his romantic life soon became far more complicated than the image Motown presented to the public. While still married, Ruffin maintained a relationship with Jenna Sapia, later known as Jenna Ruffin. They had a son, David Ruffin Jr. Meanwhile, another relationship would become especially famous because it involved Motown singer Tammy Terrell. Ruffin and Terrell began seeing each other during the 1960s, when his marriage to Sandra had not yet legally ended. According to accounts surrounding their relationship, Terrell reportedly discovered Ruffin was married only after their romance had become serious. Their relationship subsequently became notorious for allegations that Ruffin physically abused her. Those claims have been repeated by people within the Motown circle, but responsible storytelling should attribute them rather than dramatizing undocumented private scenes. Ruffin's marriage to Sandra eventually ended in divorce in 1967. His personal problems increasingly overlapped with his professional difficulties. In 1968, the Temptations dismissed him after repeated conflicts involving missed performances and demands for greater individual recognition. Ruffin later pursued a solo career producing memorable recordings, including My Whole World ended the moment you left me. Yet instability followed him for years. Substance abuse became another serious struggle, complicating relationships and career opportunities. He died in Philadelphia on June 1, 1991 at only 50, with authorities determining that an accidental cocaine overdose caused his death. Ruffin's story does not require invented affairs to fit this subject. The documented overlap between marriage and other significant relationships is already revealing. Behind one of Motown's most unforgettable voices stood a gifted but troubled man whose romantic choices repeatedly created consequences beyond the stage. Marvin Gaye. Marvin Gaye created some of the most intimate love songs in American music, yet his own romantic life was marked by overlapping relationships, emotional turmoil, and painful contradictions. In 1964, Gaye married Anna Gordy, the sister of Motown founder Berry Gordy. She was about 17 years older than Marvin and had been an important figure in his early career. Their marriage, however, gradually deteriorated as Gaye's fame expanded and his personal life became increasingly complicated. The decisive turning point came when Gaye met Janice Hunter in 1973. Gaye was 34, Hunter was 17. He was still legally married to Anna when the relationship began. Marvin and Janice soon became deeply involved and had two children, Nona and Frankie. The situation was hardly secret within his personal circle, and the relationship intensified an already troubled marriage. Gaye and Anna eventually separated, although their divorce was not finalized until 1977. The divorce produced one of music history's strangest financial arrangements. Gaye agreed that part of the royalties from his next album would go to Anna, inspiring the brutally personal 1978 record Here My Dear. By then, he had married Janice. Their relationship, however, became turbulent as well. They separated and eventually divorced in 1981. Janice later wrote about their marriage in her memoir describing infidelity, jealousy, drug use, and instability. Those recollections should be attributed to her rather than treated as independently verified scenes, but Gaye's overlapping relationship timeline itself is well documented. Marvin Gaye died tragically on April 3, 1984, at age 44 after being shot by his father during an argument. His story contains a painful irony. The man who could make millions believe completely in romantic devotion struggled to create lasting stability in his own relationships. His songs celebrated love beautifully. His private life revealed how difficult sustaining that love could actually be. Rick James. Rick James rarely pretended that his private life matched conventional expectations. The funk superstar behind Super Freak built an image around excess, rebellion, sexuality, and nightlife, and later described much of that lifestyle openly in his memoirs. Unlike artists whose alleged affairs survive primarily through rumor, James himself discussed numerous sexual relationships and acknowledged how fame and substance abuse intensified his behavior. One of his best-known relationships was with actress Linda Blair, who became involved with James during the early 1980s. James later wrote extensively about their romance, though some of his more sensational claims represent his version of events and should be presented accordingly. He also had significant relationships with other women, including Tanya Hijazi, whom he married in 1996 after years together. They had a son, Tasman, and divorced in 2002. James was also professionally and personally connected to singer Tina Marie, but their relationship has often been exaggerated in retrospective storytelling. Marie acknowledged an intense bond with James, while accounts differ about exactly how their romantic relationship should be characterized. It is safer not to turn every close association in James's life into a confirmed affair. What is beyond dispute is that James's lifestyle became increasingly destructive during the height of his addiction. Cocaine use, particularly crack cocaine, consumed enormous portions of his life and contributed to serious legal problems. In the early 1990s, James was convicted in connection with assaults against women and ultimately served time in prison. Those criminal cases should be distinguished from consensual relationships or infidelity rather than sensationally combining them. After prison, James attempted to rebuild his career and continued performing despite serious health problems. He died on August 6, 2004, at age 56. Rick James created funk that celebrated freedom and excess, but his biography reveals their darker consequences. What began as the glamorous mythology of a rock and roll lifestyle eventually became something capable of damaging relationships, freedom, health, and ultimately the man himself. B.B. King. B.B. King spent more than 6 decades singing about heartbreak, temptation, and troubled relationships, and parts of his private life were remarkably close to the stories heard in his blues. Born Riley B. King in Mississippi in 1925, he married Martha Lee Denton in 1946. Their marriage ended in 1952, and King subsequently married Sue Carol Hall in 1958. That second marriage lasted until 1966. King repeatedly explained that constant touring made conventional married life extremely difficult. At his peak, he sometimes performed hundreds of shows in a single year, spending enormous stretches of time away from home. His relationships with women became part of his own candid recollections rather than merely tabloid mythology. King did not present himself as an example of traditional monogamy. His enormous family became one of the most frequently discussed aspects of his personal life. 15 people were publicly recognized or described as his children, reportedly involving 15 different mothers. However, this detail requires careful wording. King was reportedly infertile, according to biographical accounts, and questions about biological paternity emerged. He nevertheless accepted and supported people he considered his children. Therefore, saying DNA testing conclusively proved that he biologically fathered 15 children would be inaccurate. King never married again after his second divorce. Instead, the road effectively became the most consistent relationship of his adult life. His schedule was extraordinary. Even as he grew older, he continued touring relentlessly, carrying his beloved guitar, Lucille, from city to city. B.B. King died on May 14, 2015 at age 89. The blues legend never needed a manufactured secret life to make his story compelling. His marriages failed, his relationships were numerous, and his family structure was extraordinarily complicated. Yet he remained remarkably candid about his imperfections. Perhaps that honesty explains why his blues sounded so convincing. When B.B. King sang about desire, regret, and losing love, he was not simply performing somebody else's emotions. He had spent a lifetime confronting versions of them himself. Jackie Wilson. Jackie Wilson earned the nickname Mr. Excitement because few singers could match his combination of vocal power, athletic movement, and magnetic stage presence. Behind that electrifying image, however, was an unstable, romantic life involving marriage, other relationships, and consequences that sometimes became dangerously public. Wilson married Freda Hood in 1951. While still very young, they had children together, but his growing fame brought constant touring and attention from admirers. Biographical accounts describe Wilson as having numerous relationships outside his marriage. Rather than repeating sensational claims about an exact number of mistresses, which are difficult to verify, the documented events surrounding his personal life provide more than enough drama. The most notorious incident occurred in 1961. Wilson was shot and seriously wounded by Juanita Jones, a woman with whom he had been involved. Accounts of the precise circumstances have varied, but Wilson suffered serious internal injuries and required emergency treatment. Remarkably, he survived and eventually returned to performing. The episode exposed just how complicated his private relationships had become. His marriage to Freda ended in divorce in 1965. Wilson later married Harleanne Harris in 1967, though that relationship also became troubled. At the same time, tragedy struck his family repeatedly. His son, Jackie Wilson Jr., was killed in 1970, an enormous personal loss that added another painful chapter to an already turbulent life. Then, during a performance in New Jersey in September 1975, Wilson collapsed on stage after suffering a heart attack. Although resuscitated, severe brain damage left him incapacitated for years. He never performed again. Jackie Wilson died on January 21, 1984, at age 49. His life contained a striking contrast. On stage, Wilson appeared effortlessly controlled, charming, and unstoppable. Away from the applause, relationships, family tragedy, and personal instability created a far harsher reality. Mr. Excitement gave audiences unforgettable performances, but the life behind that dazzling smile was anything but simple. Miles Davis. Miles Davis spent his life reinventing jazz, but the restless personality that fueled his music also appeared throughout his romantic relationships. Born in 1926, Davis became a towering figure through albums such as Kind of Blue Sketches of Spain and Bitches Brew. Away from the studio, however, his marriages and relationships were often complicated by jealousy, infidelity, addiction, and the pressures surrounding his extraordinary career. Davis married dancer Frances Taylor in 1959. Their relationship became deeply troubled, and Taylor later spoke publicly about Davis's infidelity and abusive behavior during their marriage. Davis himself acknowledged serious wrongdoing in his autobiography. They eventually divorced in 1968. Later that year, he married Betty Mabry, a model and musician approximately 18 years younger, who introduced him to figures and sounds from the emerging rock and funk scenes. That marriage lasted only about a year. Davis later accused Betty of being involved with Jimi Hendrix, an allegation she denied. Afterward, Davis continued having relationships with other women before marrying actress Cicely Tyson in 1981. Their marriage also deteriorated, ending in divorce in 1989. Tyson later described difficult aspects of their relationship in her memoir. Davis' personal history should not be simplified into the unsupported claim that he was medically addicted to women. What is documented is a pattern of turbulent relationships, alongside drug dependency and periods of destructive behavior. Davis himself was unusually candid about many of his failures, leaving historians substantial material without needing invented backstage stories. He died on September 28, 1991, at age 65. The contradiction remains striking. Miles could exercise astonishing control over silence timing and musical space while struggling to maintain stability away from the stage. His relationships sometimes fractured under behaviors he later acknowledged himself. The music was revolutionary. The man who created it was far more troubled and complicated. Ike Turner. Ike Turner occupies one of the most complicated places in American music history. His work helped shape early rock and roll, blues, and R&B, yet his musical achievements became inseparable from disturbing accounts of his private behavior. Turner's romantic history was particularly tangled. He went through multiple marriages and relationships, sometimes giving contradictory accounts himself about exactly how many women he had legally married. His most famous relationship was with Tina Turner, born Anna Mae Bullock. They became musical partners before marrying in the early 1960s. Together, the Ike and Tina Turner Revue became a formidable live act, but Tina later described their marriage as violent, controlling, and repeatedly unfaithful. In her autobiography, I, Tina, she detailed physical abuse and Ike's relationships with other women. Ike disputed or minimized portions of her account at different times, although he later acknowledged hitting Tina. Tina left Ike in 1976, reportedly escaping with little money, and their divorce was finalized in 1978. Turner subsequently had other marriages and relationships, including with Margaret Ann Thomas and late in his life singer Audrey Madison. Madison later published her own account of their troubled relationship. Turner also struggled extensively with cocaine addiction. His drug use contributed to legal problems and periods of imprisonment, while damaging a career that had once placed him near the foundations of rock music. He eventually achieved a musical comeback, winning a Grammy for Risen with the Blues shortly before his death. Ike Turner died on December 12, 2007, at age 76. The medical examiner identified cocaine toxicity as the primary cause of death, with other health conditions contributing. His story requires no exaggeration. Turner possessed genuine musical brilliance, but documented accounts of abuse, infidelity, addiction, and unstable relationships profoundly complicated that legacy. Few figures demonstrate more clearly how artistic importance does not erase personal accountability. Teddy Pendergrass. Teddy Pendergrass became one of soul music's greatest symbols of romance and sensuality. After emerging as the unmistakable lead voice of Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes, he launched a hugely successful solo career with songs such as Close the Door, Turn Off the Lights and Love TKO. His concerts attracted devoted female audiences, and his image as an intensely charismatic sex symbol became central to his commercial success. That fame also surrounded Pendergrass with opportunities and complicated relationships. He married Karen Still in 1987, several years after the accident that permanently changed his life, but before marriage he had relationships with multiple women and fathered children. Accounts of his earlier lifestyle describe a period in which celebrity touring and sexual freedom frequently overlapped. Still, it is important not to convert every rumor about a famous sex symbol into a verified affair. The defining event of Pendergrass' personal life occurred on March 18, 1982, when his Rolls-Royce crashed into trees in Philadelphia. He suffered a spinal cord injury that left him paralyzed from the chest down. A passenger, Tenika Watson, was in the vehicle. Her presence generated enormous gossip, but the accident itself does not prove adultery, and responsible storytelling should not present it as evidence that Pendergrass was cheating. What followed was more remarkable than the rumors. After rehabilitation and periods of depression, Pendergrass returned to recording. In 1985, he made an emotional appearance at Live Aid in Philadelphia, performing publicly for the first time since the crash. He later continued recording and advocating for people with spinal cord injuries. Pendergrass and Karen divorced in 2002. He later married Joan Williams in 2008. Teddy Pendergrass died from respiratory failure related to colon cancer treatment on January 13, 2010, at age 59. His story contains temptation and complicated romance, but its most powerful chapter is survival after losing the physical freedom central to his stage persona. Teddy found a way to sing again. Nat King Cole. Nat King Cole represented elegance to millions of listeners. With his velvet voice, impeccable appearance, and recordings such as Unforgettable, Mona Lisa, and When I Fall in Love, he became one of the first black entertainers to achieve extraordinary mainstream success in post-war America. Behind that polished image, however, Cole's romantic history contained a chapter that sharply contrasted with the devotion celebrated in his songs. Cole married his first wife Nadine Robinson in 1937. But while still married, he met singer Maria Hawkins Ellington, who was not related to Duke Ellington, and fell in love with her. Cole's marriage to Nadine ended in divorce in 1948, and only days later he married Maria. That documented overlap alone demonstrates that his romantic life was more complicated than his carefully managed public persona suggested. Nat and Maria built a prominent family and had 5 children, including future singer Natalie Cole. Their marriage lasted for the remainder of Nat's life, but biographies have described additional extramarital relationships. One widely discussed relationship involved Swedish actress Gunilla Hutton during the early 1960s. Hutton later spoke about their relationship, saying Cole considered leaving his marriage, though he ultimately remained with Maria. This distinction matters. Claims that Cole maintained a vast network of secret mistresses throughout his entire life go beyond what should responsibly be stated without stronger evidence. Specific documented relationships provide a more accurate story than sensational numbers or invented encounters. Cole's life ended frighteningly early. A heavy cigarette smoker, he was diagnosed with lung cancer in 1964. Despite treatment, his condition deteriorated rapidly. He died on February 15, 1965, at only 45 years old. Nat King Cole sold romance with extraordinary sincerity, yet his private life showed that romantic talent did not guarantee marital simplicity. His story was not one of perfection, it was one of immense artistry existing beside very human contradictions. Sam Cooke. Sam Cooke was one of soul music's most gifted pioneers, a singer whose smooth voice made romance sound effortless. Behind classics such as You Sent Me Cupid and Wonderful World, however, stood a personal life considerably more complicated than his polished public image. Cook married Barbara Campbell in 1959, and they had children together, but accounts of his life describe numerous relationships with women while he was married and traveling as one of America's most successful performers. Cook's fame created opportunities that were difficult to separate from his private behavior. Biographers have documented his reputation as a womanizer, and Barbara was reportedly aware that her husband was not consistently faithful. Still, responsible storytelling should avoid assigning him an invented number of affairs or presenting every woman photographed with him as a mistress. The established picture is compelling enough. Cook was married frequently away from home and had relationships beyond that marriage. His final night has often been sensationalized because of this reputation. On December 11, 1964, Cook was fatally shot at the Hacienda Motel in Los Angeles by manager Bertha Franklin. Franklin maintained that she acted in self-defense after Cook confronted her while searching for Eliza Boyer, the woman who had accompanied him to the motel. A coroner's jury ultimately ruled the killing justifiable homicide, although questions and alternative theories have persisted for decades. What should not be claimed is that Cook was simply killed while cheating. The precise circumstances remain complicated, and his presence with Boyer does not independently establish every detail of their interaction. Cook died at only 33 years old, leaving behind a wife, children, unanswered questions, and an extraordinary musical legacy. The painful contradiction remains. Sam Cooke could express tenderness with breathtaking sincerity, yet accounts of his marriage reveal a man who struggled with fidelity. His music promised everlasting devotion. His real life proved far less simple. Behind some of the greatest love songs in R&B history were private lives far more complicated than the lyrics suggested. These 15 legends gave millions of listeners unforgettable songs about devotion, heartbreak, and desire, yet documented affairs and broken marriages revealed a very different reality away from the stage. Fame may have created endless temptation, but every choice still carried consequences for spouses, children, careers, and reputations. So what do you think? Did celebrity and life on the road make faithfulness harder, or should fame never be an excuse for betrayal? Which story surprised you the most? Share your opinion in the comments and tell us which R&B legend you believe had the most complicated love life. Subscribe to Golden Black Legends for more untold stories behind the music.